The last time my father looked me in the eye, it wasn't love I saw, it was disappointment, clean and cold. He called me reckless. My sister called me irrelevant. And when they erased my name from the company I built, neither of them hesitated. I remember standing in that boardroom, watching my project folder slide across the table, straight into Serena's hands, while my father said, "Family comes second to reputation." That sentence broke something in me. Not my heart. That part had already gone numb, but my belief that love could survive betrayal. So I walked out without a word. They thought I left defeated. They had no idea I was already building something that would make them remember my name, not out of pride, but out of silence. My name is Minette Radcliffe, and this is the story of the day my sister laughed at my ticket until the man in uniform spoke my name. The announcements at Dulles rang through the terminal, sharp and metallic, chasing the rhythm of rolling suitcases across the marble floor. I pulled mine behind me, keeping my breathing steady. This morning, my family, if that word still applied, was headed to Zurich for the International Aviation Summit. I wasn't invited, but I came anyway. Not to be with them, but because my reason for being here was very different. At the first-class counter, my father, Victor Radcliffe, stood in a flawless gray suit, voice raised just enough for everyone nearby to know who he was. Next to him, Serena, my half-sister, looked like a magazine cover. White dress, red lipstick, and a smile trained for attention. When she saw my boarding pass, she let out a quiet laugh. "Economy?" she said, tone dripping with mock sweetness. "That's adorable? Still doing that minimalist thing?" My father glanced from my ticket to my worn shoes. "Try not to embarrass the family name this time," he said, as if issuing a corporate order. I smiled faintly. "Don't worry, Dad. I won't be sitting anywhere near it." Serena's laugh merged with the boarding call, first class to Zurich now departing. Their sleek luggage rolled away, their lives polished to perfection. I stayed where I was, watching them disappear through the VIP gate, realizing how far I'd already walked from that world. I wasn't really left behind. I was simply taking off on a different route. Through the glass, I spotted a silver aircraft marked with the insignia of the United States Air Force. I knew that plane. I knew who waited there. "Sometimes," I whispered, "the longest flights begin with the smallest ticket." 2 years earlier, I sat in the glass boardroom on the 35th floor of Radcliffe Aerotech. My grandfather's portrait hung over the table like a silent witness. In front of me lay the final blueprint for autopilot AI. 3 years of work. Every sleepless night. Every test flight compressed into a single folder. I was certain this would be the day my father announced my promotion to Chief Technical Director. Then Serena walked in, dressed in red like she owned the room. My father's voice was warm when he said, "This is Serena, your new strategic director." The words cut deeper than any layoff notice ever could. Before I could breathe, Serena unfolded a paper from her folder. "Before we celebrate," she said sweetly, "the board should probably know that part of Minette's design was leaked to Volmer Aerospace in France. Coincidence?" A rush of blood hit my ears. "That's not true," I managed. "That data never left this building." "Then check your laptop," she said, shrugging. "Or whoever you emailed last." My father looked at me the way he'd look at a stranger caught trespassing. "When reputation's on the line, family comes second." He signed the suspension papers on the spot. No proof, no hesitation, just silence, and Serena smiling behind him like she'd won something permanent. I left the company with my badge deactivated and my faith fractured. A week later, I uncovered proof that Serena herself had sent the files from her personal account. My father refused to even read it. "Stop digging, Minette. You'll only make things worse." That was when I understood. He didn't care about truth, only image, and there was no image left for me. So I packed my life into 2 suitcases and drove out of Washington D.C. under the midnight rain, vowing I would never apologize for being right. Seattle greeted me with rain, honest, unpolished, and unafraid to fall. I rented a half-abandoned garage near Lake Union, set my old computer on a metal table, and started rebuilding the code they'd stolen line by line. Nights bled into mornings. I wrote notes on the walls in black marker. Altitude begins on the ground. Every refusal from a bank taught me how to stretch resolve further. Every failed prototype pushed me one line of code closer to flight. I sold my car, canceled my lease, and moved into that garage with two engineers who'd once quit Radcliffe because they believed in me, Jonas and Riley. We lived on caffeine and the stubborn idea that faith could substitute for funding. 18 months later, our system worked. At Edwards Air Force Base, the simulated aircraft lost control mid-flight, and Astrodyne Flight AI stabilized it in 1.4 seconds flat. The control room erupted. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. A tall man in uniform approached, eyes sharp but kind. "Colonel Everett Shaw, U.S. Air Force," he said, extending a hand. "That's one hell of a system, Ms. Radcliffe." "It's not just a system, Colonel," I told him, shaking his hand. "It's proof I was never the problem." He nodded. "The Pentagon will want to see this. I'll make the call." 2 months later, Astrodyne signed a federal defense contract. The project Radcliffe Aerotech had thrown away was now a national program. The day I received my federal clearance card labeled Commander Consultant, Department of Defense, I smiled to myself. They had stolen my wings, so I built my own jet, back at Dulles, the same terminal where everything once fell apart. I watched them pose for attention. Serena stood at the first-class counter beside my father, flashing her perfect smile at the attendant as if the red carpet belonged to her. "Look at her," she whispered, loud enough to slice through the air. Same jacket, same shoes, still pretending independence is glamour. My father chuckled. "She could have had a seat next to me. She chose the hard way." I walked closer, voice even. Maybe the hard way leads higher. They froze, not because of the words, but because of the calm behind them. Serena laughed, a brittle sound. "Higher? With that ticket?" I handed my economy boarding pass to the clerk, then turned toward the restricted corridor. A wave of murmurs followed. Boots struck the floor in perfect rhythm as a group of Air Force officers approached. The lead officer stopped in front of me, posture precise. "Commander Radcliffe, your clearance is ready. Colonel Shaw is expecting you." Silence rippled across the gate. Serena's face drained of color. My father turned rigid. I smiled faintly. Perfect timing. I was getting tired of waiting in line. As I followed the officers toward the private military terminal, I glanced back once, through the glass. Serena stared, stunned. She laughed at my ticket, I thought. Now, she can't afford this flight. The aircraft lifted smoothly off the runway, engines humming like a steady heartbeat. For the first time in years, no one could suspend or silence me. Across from me, Colonel Shaw placed a folder on the table. "Your presentation's set for 0900 tomorrow. NATO's delegation will attend, along with Radcliffe Aerotech." I raised a brow. "Of course. He never misses a spotlight." Shaw's tone softened. "You ready to face them?" "I've been ready since the day they replaced me." Clouds stretched beneath us, soft as memory. I remembered nights in Seattle when rain bled into my sketches, when my father said I'd never make it without his name. I didn't prove him wrong out of anger. I did it with results. Shaw leaned back, studying me. "You've flown higher than they'll ever reach." I looked out the window, the sky an endless indigo. "No, Colonel, I just stopped landing where they told me to." Sunlight poured through the cabin, glinting off the metal badge pinned to my jacket. Commander Minette Radcliffe, Department of Defense. They had once stripped my title and my dignity. Now, both were etched in steel, catching the light, proof that altitude is earned, not given. The Montreux Palace glimmered against the still water of Lake Geneva, every chandelier dripping with gold. I stepped inside wearing a navy blue dress, the color of restraint and command. The sound of my heels against the marble reminded me of the boardroom 2 years ago, the day they cast me out. Only this time, no one was calling security. This time, I had been invited. Violins swelled, champagne flowed. Across the hall, my father held court with a cluster of European investors. Serena stood at his side in crimson silk, a living exclamation mark. Our eyes met. Hers widened for a beat. Then she smiled as if the surprise cost her nothing. "Minette, you came. I didn't expect to see you. Here." "Neither did I," said, voice even. My father's gaze landed on the badge hanging from my neck. "Guest." "Press?" he asked. "Or still chasing that little startup thing?" "Just here to watch something take off." They laughed. A mistake. The host's voice boomed through the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote sponsor, Dr. Minette Radcliffe, founder and chief architect of Astrodyne Systems." The room spun toward me. The spotlight hit like sunlight after a storm. Serena's glass slipped from her hand. My father froze mid-breath. I walked to the podium. 2 years ago, I was told I was reckless, unfit, unworthy of the Radcliffe name. Today, I stand under my own, and it flies higher. Applause detonated like thunder. Cameras flashed. Power had officially changed hands. Later, on the balcony, Serena found me. "You really did it," she rasped. "You've got the brains, Minette, but you'll never have the crowd." "I don't need the crowd," I said. "I build the sky they fly in." As she turned, I saw a USB glint between her fingers before she slipped into the elevator. My stomach tightened. Not again. Geneva at night glowed blue and silent. Something in me knew not to wait until morning. I threw on a coat and followed the instinct that had kept me alive through worse storms. On the rooftop terrace, Serena stood with a man in a black suit, his accent unmistakably French. "You'll get the prototype data tonight," she said. "Just wire the payment. Father doesn't have to know." "He won't," he replied. I stayed hidden, recording every word. My hands didn't shake. When she handed him the USB, I turned away, sent the audio to Colonel Shaw with a short message. For once, let justice speak before family. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. "Stay put," Shaw ordered. "We've got it." I watched the lake shimmer below. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, only the dull ache of recognizing someone beyond saving. Serena had learned nothing. The next morning, tension buzzed through the conference hall. Midway through a presentation, Swiss security and U.S. Air Force officials entered. Serena froze as they approached. The Frenchman was already in cuffs. My father leapt up. "What is this nonsense? She's my daughter." Shaw's voice cut through the murmurs. "So is Commander Radcliffe. Mr. Radcliffe, and she just saved your company from international charges." Gasps rippled across the hall. I stepped forward, meeting my father's stunned eyes. "You once said reputation was everything." "Yes," he managed. "Then protect it, by telling them the truth." Serena turned, tears streaking her face. "You wanted them to see me humiliated, didn't you?" "No," I said quietly. "I wanted them to see the truth. It just took longer to arrive." That afternoon, Shaw texted, "Charges confirmed. Serena will be extradited for questioning. You did good, Commander." I stared out at the lake, glass untouched. "No, Colonel," I whispered. "I just stopped letting them do harm." Morning light flooded the glass ceiling of the Geneva Convention Hall, scattering across the marble floor like ripples on water. The air carried the quiet weight of expectation. The world of aviation was waiting for the final presentation, the future of autonomous flight. I stepped onto the stage. The spotlight no longer blinded me, it steadied me. In the front row, my father sat motionless, the lines on his face carved deeper by a sleepless night. The seat beside him, once Serena's, was empty. No one left to blame. No one left to mock. Only truth. 2 years ago, I began, my voice clear. I was told I wasn't disciplined enough to lead. Today, the system I built guides hundreds of aircraft across 3 continents. They called me reckless. I call it unafraid. Applause burst from the audience, but I continued. They said I couldn't fly without their wings. The truth is, I was never meant to fly that low. The silence that followed was electric. Then the room rose in thunderous clapping. I looked down at my father. He didn't clap, but his eyes, for the first time, saw me. Some measure success by seats on a plane, I said to the crowd. I measure it by the altitude of integrity. And in that moment, I realized, no one needed to bow, and no one needed to prove a thing. I wasn't the disowned daughter anymore. I was the architect of what honor truly meant. The late afternoon light settled over Lake Geneva like gold dust. The water was still enough to hold the reflection of the sky, a mirror for everything that had already broken and begun to mend. I sat alone on the stone bench by the shore, listening to the faint rhythm of waves brushing against the dock. For the first time in years, the silence didn't hurt. It just existed. I heard footsteps behind me, slow, uneven, familiar. My father. He wasn't wearing his tailored armor this time, just a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he exhaled, the sound heavy enough to carry regret. I failed you, he said quietly. I failed all of us. I looked at him, steady. You didn't fail me, Dad. You just stopped believing in me, and that's worse. He nodded once, eyes glinting with the kind of sorrow that only comes from years too late. You were always the better pilot. I just didn't see it. No, I said softly. I just learned to fly without your runway. We fell into silence again. The air smelled faintly of rain and jet fuel drifting from the airfield across the lake. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. We're losing everything, he admitted, his voice cracking around the edges. If I could use even one part of your module, the auxiliary safety code, it could save what's left of Radcliffe Aerotech. Take it, I said, cutting through his hesitation. He froze. You'd give it to me, after everything? Yes, I said simply. Because I built it to help people fly safer, not to punish anyone, not even you. He lowered his gaze, the weight of disbelief softening into something rawer. Grief, maybe, or acceptance. The light shifted, turning the lake into a sheet of fire. I felt the wind lift strands of my hair as I spoke the words I had carried like a stone for years. I forgive you, I whispered, not because you deserve it, but because I do. For a long time, he didn't move. Then his shoulders trembled, and I saw the tears fall, quiet, unperformed. You just did what I never could, he murmured. You made something that lasts. We stayed there as the sun sank lower, painting the water in molten gold. Neither of us spoke again. There was nothing left to fix, nothing left to fight. The wind off the lake brushed past us, gentle and cold, and in that quiet, I finally understood. Legacy isn't built on what a family owns, but on what one person refuses to lose. Faith, even when no one else has it. Night had fallen over Geneva, wrapping the city in a silence too gentle to disturb. Across the private runway, the silver body of the U.S. Air Force jet shimmered beneath amber floodlights, every polished curve catching the glow like molten gold. Colonel Shaw waited at the base of the stairway, posture straight, expression calm but warm. When our eyes met, he lifted a hand in salute. Commander, he said, his voice steady against the hum of the engines. Home's waiting. I smiled, the kind that comes only when something long unfinished finally closes. Home isn't a place, Colonel, I said quietly. It's altitude. He nodded once, the faintest smile crossing his face. I turned and climbed the steps, the sound of my heels echoing against the metal. When I reached the top, I paused and looked out across the airfield. The lake glowed in the distance, Geneva, calm and glistening, stretched like a silver scar across the dark. Inside the cabin, the lights dimmed to a soft blue. I fastened my seatbelt, glancing at the reflection in the window. The woman staring back wasn't the one who'd walked out of Datsichi, with a revoked badge and shaking hands. She looked steady now, measured, whole, no longer defined by what she'd lost. The engines roared, deep and certain. The wheels began to roll, faster, stronger, until the ground gave way beneath us. The city lights dropped away in clusters, tiny and irrelevant. I whispered into the hum of ascent. She laughed at my ticket once. She was right. It wasn't to her destination. The sky opened wide, endless and blue-black. Clouds folded beneath the wings like soft armor. I leaned back, eyes half closed, feeling the quiet pull of gravity finally loosen. Every wound, every insult, every loss began to dissolve into the dark behind me. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a thin line of gold began to rise, dawn breaking over the Alps, and for the first time in years, as light poured over the wing, I felt it. Not victory, not revenge, freedom,